Hello and welcome to Sincerely Speaking. I am thrilled to bring to you today a conversation with my new friend, Tisha Haufler. We met through a common mastermind and we instantly hit it off. She is an amazing person who has a heart for helping other women through some of the tough transitions in life, and I'll let her talk more about that in a minute. But I just knew that she would have so much value to share with all of us today. So I am excited to have you here, Tisha. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me, Marcy.
So let's start by just talking a little bit about how you got into this journey and exactly what it is that you do.
Well, I got into this journey because in 2020, it was a rough year for all of us, right? But during that time, during lockdown, I also went through menopause. So went through this whole journey of menopause, of all of the struggles and everything that comes up. Not a lot of support because everything was closed. You couldn't see your friends. You couldn't, just a lot of factors that kind of went into all of it. But basically what happened was I did a lot of searching on the internet. I did a lot of soul searching, talking to friends. And the bottom line was there's a ton of information online about the symptoms of menopause. There's not a ton of information on how to be in menopause. So whether that be perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause, it's really not one of those things that it's like a cold and we're going to get over. It's a season of life and we have to learn how to deal with it. And through the journey, I realized that a number of my friends were having the same struggle, and specifically around work. And a lot of them were leaving the workplace. It's difficult to have these conversations in the workplace. There's a lot of shame around menopause, which I think is so interesting. And because of that, I've always had an educator's heart. So my degree is in health education. And I thought, this is such an opportunity just to get out there and help women through this and see where I can be a help. So became a life coach and kind of working with women through both just the menopause piece of it, relationships, talking to their husbands, their children, their parents, and then specifically in business as well.
That's awesome. Now, before our gentlemen friend who are listening check out, listen, because it's not just about this process, right? Like there are so many transitions in our life that for whatever reason, we feel like nobody else understands us or nobody else can see where we're coming from. We feel so alone, especially I think the pandemic highlighted how isolated we can be in certain things, right? And moving away from the big part of the isolation in the pandemic, we are struggling still in so many areas to reconnect with that aspect of we're not alone, right? So let's talk a little bit about how do we start talking about some of these things, whether it's perimenopause, menopause, or any other transition in life that might have us feeling isolated. How do we start verbalizing those feelings and that sense of isolation that we might be feeling?
Well, I'm really glad you specifically kind of went to the men on this one, because I have to tell you, one of the first things when I launched all of this, I got a few calls, and one of the things was I would really like you to do a class for men and supporting their wives through menopause. So I thought that was so interesting, because here I am thinking this is such a big opportunity for women. But at the same time, I mean, many of us have been married for 20 years plus, right? Mm-hmm. And suddenly we don't even know how to communicate with our husbands, let alone our husbands knowing how to communicate with us. Yeah. So I think one of the big things is we have such busy lives. We're raising kids, we're doing jobs. Many times we're a dual income family, and we've kind of lost that connection with just our spouse. And to be able to have that conversation and start that conversation there is so important. And Marcy, I think the biggest thing is to communicate that it's confusing and it's upsetting and it's a whole new set of rules for us that we're not ready for. And we don't really know what's going on. So it's hard for us to communicate that. So I think that that's really where it needs to start, is with your partner, with your, if you're not in a relationship, with your kids, with your parents, and in some cases with your friends, because that's where your support's going to come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I would love to hear your opinion on this, right? But I think that a lot of it also has to do with this should haves and could haves that we embrace, especially as we get older, right? Because we go through a bunch of transitions. Like, we're not the same person when we're single and when we get married. We're not the same person when we're newly married and when we have kids. So we go through a number of transitions, but suddenly we get to this later stage in life and there's a new transition, but we're like, no, we should be settled, or we should have done, or so talk to me a little bit about, do you see that? Is that like a factor that you see in your clients?
I think the number one thing I do, Marcy, is an exercise to help women discover what they like. We so lose sight of ourselves, because we're so busy being moms and being wives and being employees, that we're so busy. We're people pleasers at heart, I think, as women. And so we're so busy making sure that everyone else is happy. I know for me, my husband asked me, what do you like? What do you want to do? And it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I don't know what I like anymore. I don't know what I want to do. Because your body's not the same. You can't, like, I was a big volleyball player and softball player. And it's like, I don't want to go out there with those kids and get hurt. I don't want to do those things anymore. So what is it that I like? I don't know. So, it's funny, we live on a golf course. I've never played golf in my life, but I've lived here for 23 years. So now I'm exploring golf because I've always been, so it's discovering things that you might want to do, that you might be interested in, that you would have never considered before. But you're in, just as you said, you're in a different season of life and things change. And you may not have taken the time to really even know yourself and have this conversation with yourself. So sometimes it's just a matter of journaling and meditating and figuring yourself out.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you mentioned that, because I have found that even when I was a teacher, right? And you ask young people, who are you? What do you want?
They don't know. Yeah.
They don't know, right? And as we get older, we assume that people know, and we just take things at face value, right? But you ask most people, who are you? And they give you a profession or a title. They don't really tell you who they are. And you ask them what they want, they talk about everybody else but themselves for the most part, right? Especially women. Like, what do you want? I want my kids to be happy. I want my husband to be okay. But what do you want? So funny.
Well, and it's really interesting. The other thing that happens is we get caught in this rut of, when you talk to other women, the two things that women always talk about is, I'm so busy and I'm so tired. So I call it your busy badge. You need to take your busy badge off. And we need to kind of look at, why are you busy and why are you tired? Because I don't think any of us even know. We just are so used to saying, I'm so busy and I'm so tired, that we don't even know how we're getting there. So it's such a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that we had talked about in our previous conversation is this idea of extending ourselves a little grace, right? It's sometimes so hard. So how do you help people understand that they need to extend themselves a little bit of grace?
Well, it's kind of that whole thing of, when you're on the plane and they say you must put your oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on someone else. You can't help anyone else unless you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
With women, I think it's really hard to put ourselves first because, like you said, we're always making sure our kids are healthy and happy, that our husbands are doing well, that our parents are in a good place. But we need to make sure we're taking care of us, that we're doing what we need, that we're, if we're struggling, allow ourselves to struggle, give ourselves that grace, find somebody to work through with it. So,
yeah. Now, like you said before, a lot of people are somewhat aware of the physical symptoms of perimenopause and menopause and all these things, but very few of us, even as we start going through the process, we're not really aware of the extent to which this can impact the rest of our lives. Can you help us bring a little bit more awareness into that? Like, speak to some of the things that you've seen and experienced women and their partners as they start going through this transition.
Well, like I said, I think that shame plays a big piece in this. And I don't know why with women, aging is shameful. So and you see it a lot on the internet these days. Like, you see Andy McDowell talking about, why are people talking about my gray hair, but no one's saying anything about George Clooney's.
Yeah.
So why is it we have to dye our hair and we have to get plastic surgery and we have to have all these cryofacials and Botox and all this stuff, where men age gracefully and women become old hags, right? It's just this weird sociological chasm that we kind of fall in. And there's this shame around communicating that we're actually aging, that we're going through menopause, that we're struggling. Going through menopause and aging is a big piece of it. And then struggling. I think as women, we hide our struggle.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem, because if we're not showing our struggle and we're not talking about our struggle, no one else is going to talk about theirs. And that's where we need to start being more authentic in our communication with others, with friends, with like the conversation you and I are having right now. There's some serious struggles when you go through menopause. I'm not going to lie. I've had some really bad days, and sometimes they continue for a really long time. And we need to talk about it. It needs to be out there. We need to talk about how it's impacting our jobs and our families and our kids and ourselves, how it's impacting us.
Yeah.
It's super important.
Absolutely. I find it really funny every time gray hair is mentioned on women, because obviously I gave up that battle a long time ago. No, I embraced it, is what I really did. But
and it's beautiful.
Thank you. But I have so many women specifically come up to me and go, I love your hair. I could never, but it's so pretty on you. And I'm like, well, why not?
Why not?
Just embrace it. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, the young girls are paying hundreds of dollars to try and go gray, and they can't do it. And
that's what I've been telling people. Yes.
We are trying to hide it. It's just so hilarious to me.
Well, and what are we hiding from? I mean, Marcy, we've worked so hard to get where we're at. It's all these years in our past that has gotten us to where we are. Why are we hiding?
Yeah.
We shouldn't be hiding. Yeah, we should be proud.
Absolutely.
Because there's the alternative is dismal.
Yep. And I think that for me, what made it easier, honestly, was my mom went gray early, and she always and I think she meant it more like a joke, but I took it seriously. She always said, gray is wisdom. Gray is wisdom. So you're just showing your wisdom, right?
Well, and I do think that, kind of talking about wisdom, somehow that's fallen off, because when we think back to, at least when I think back to when I was a kid, I think about the wisdom of my grandparents and learning from them. And these days it's almost embarrassing, right? I mean, these younger folks should be looking to us for that wisdom. We have so much to offer, and we've been through so much, and there's so much experience. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's different experience than what they'll need now or what's going on now, but life experience doesn't change.
No, absolutely not. Now, one of the things that I believe we don't often realize, right, is that in all transitions, but especially in the one we're talking about, I feel like we end up making decisions based on the shame or the fear or the guilt, as opposed to hanging on to our ability to make empowered decisions, right? So let's talk a little bit now about how we can, first of all, recognize when our decision making is based on something other than our power, our ability, and how can we shift that a little bit?
Well, the exercise that I make women do, I call it the WISE exercise. So you need to get peaceful with yourself, and you need to say, where is my wisdom? Where is my intelligence? Where is my strength? And where is my experience? Because I think we discount what we have to offer people, and we have so much to offer. So just taking a minute and asking yourself those questions, journaling about those questions, asking the people around you, when you think about me, where do you think my strengths are? When you see me as a friend, when you need something, where would you come to me? Those kinds of things, asking the people around us and not being ashamed to ask for those things. Yeah. Where do you see me as? Where do you see my strengths? What wisdom do you see in my life? Where is my intelligence? We have both the innate intelligence as well as your emotional intelligence. And some of us have more of one than the other. And, some of us are socially awkward, but we all have these friends and these relationships that we can pull from, as well as getting peaceful with ourselves and asking ourselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then in the moment of decision making, kind of tapping into where is my heart at this moment, right? And am I pulling from those strengths, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Am I pulling from my wise zone or am I pulling from my guilt zone? So a lot of what we do as women is from our guilt zone. We feel guilty because we haven't done this for our kids, or we feel guilty because we were 5 minutes late to the job today, or we feel guilty for whatever reason might come up. So are we pulling from that guilt and other people's needs, or are we pulling from our wise zone?
That's awesome. I love those terms, wise zone and guilt zone. And we do live so often in the guilt zone. And I think as women, obviously, we focus on women feeling guilty, but I have seen that in men as well, where they operate from this guilt zone of feeling they can't support, or they can't do, or they can't stand up to whatever standard they think they need to stand up to. It's hard.
I think I do think it's across the board for sure. And there are different social situations now for men too, because I know a lot of single fathers that have raised their kids honestly, they're having the same guilt that us as women are having, because are they there enough for their kids? Are they spending too much time at work? So there are so many different, you wouldn't have seen that back in, the 1950s, 1970s, those things just weren't the norm, but we're seeing that more and more, where there are single fathers that are taking care of their kids. And it cracks me up, they're using vacuums to put ponytails in their kids' hair, and they're great problem solvers. They have the same guilt, right? We all kind of default back to that when we're decision making, unfortunately.
I think about that a lot, because I had both my mom and my dad most of the time growing up, but my dad was diagnosed with kidney disease when I was 13. And so the dynamic shifted a little bit once he got sick, and he was sick for 20 years. But near the end of his life, he was constantly asking my mom and us, did I do enough? Did I do a good job? Did I do enough to raise them right? And I just think that guilt, that sense of, are we doing the right thing, is so engulfing, right? Like it really takes over our entire being sometimes.
Well, I think being a parent from the get-go, from the minute you find out you've conceived, I think that guilt just gets built in, right? Am I doing the right thing? Have I done enough? Yeah, absolutely.
That's insane. But it's part of the process, I guess. And the more we talk about it, the more we can normalize it, right? And understand that most everybody goes through it. And if we're just willing to talk about it, it would ease the pain for everybody, but we're so clamped up sometimes.
Well, and I think too, with social media, everybody puts such a sunny glaze on everything. Oh, I have 3 beautiful children. And well, you know what? One of the days I might want to lock one of my kids in their room. They're driving me crazy, right? I mean, there are days my kids will always ask me, do you have a favorite? And I say, yeah, absolutely. And it changes every day. I have 3 kids. Sorry, but that's the way it is.
That is too funny. Yeah, I used to tell my students, because they were all like, oh, true love, teenagers, they're all into that. Yeah. And I tell them, look, guys, nobody loves anybody else more than a mother loves a child. And there are days when mothers want to strangle their children. So not this emotion that is all butterflies and beauty. It goes and comes, but you choose to stay in the love.
That's right. Every relationship is work, whatever it looks like, parent, child, any kind of marriage, any kind of relationship is work.
That's awesome. Now, in an ideal world, if we could wave a wand and make the world an ideal, perfect place, what would you wish for everybody to know about women who are going through this transition of perimenopause and menopause?
I just wish it was something that wasn't shameful or made fun of. I think when we talked earlier, one of the things that I talked about is, even when you're watching TV, there are times when they'll talk about, oh, I don't know, Susie, she's in the back, she's still going through the change. And everyone laughs, right? Oh my gosh, go talk to Susie. She's struggling. guys, we're struggling. We don't know how to manage all of this by ourselves. We need that support. And Marcy, the saddest part is women are so mean to each other. Why are we looking for ways to tear each other down? We really need to start building each other up. It's so important.
Yeah, just as human beings in general. But yeah, you're right. Women, I don't know what it is or why it happens. But yeah, just building support around each other and lifting each other up is so important.
It is. Yeah. And lifting, like I said, in the relationship and your spouse, helping them to know how they can build you up. So it's just, we really need, instead of being made fun of, we need people asking us if we're okay. Are you okay?
Yeah.
And sometimes we're not going to be. We're going to need somebody to lean on.
Absolutely. Now, for anybody listening who's going through some sort of transition and they're relating to some of the things we're talking about, what would you suggest as the first practical step to start getting out of this feeling of being consumed by the transition and start moving more powerfully, I guess, or more empowered forward?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what we talked about, the being busy and being tired. So really getting honest with yourself. Are you really busy and are you really tired? Or are you just stuck in the rut of being busy and tired? Yeah. Because I think we get in the chaos of life and we continue to do the same thing over and over. And it's time to slow down a little bit and talk to ourselves about how can we do this better? How can we be happy? How can we find something more healthy for us? So really laying down that busy badge and finding out why you're busy. Are you creating that busyness yourself? And are there some things you can let go? Because I think it's not only going to be healthy for you, but it's also going to be healthy for everyone around you. And the other thing, Marcy, I think is our responsibility where we are to model this for our daughters.
Yeah.
Our daughters need to see us go through this. They need to see that we need support. They need to see that we will stop what we're doing to find out where we need to go. We can't just keep that chaotic cycle up. We need to stop and figure out a different path.
Absolutely. And for us, it's so hard sometimes to ask for help, right?
It is.
Just being open to asking for help, I think would go a long, long way.
It is. Yeah. Why is that we are so stuck in, we have to do everything ourselves?
It's insane, but I see it everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah. That's not just women. That's everyone. No one wants to ask for help.
Yeah, if we would just be a little bit more open, right? And I think a lot of it, or a part of it, is the culture we've created, right? Where everybody lives in their own little space and nobody bothers anybody else. But we're meant to be in community. And if we can just embrace that community again and understand that community means everybody there for everybody else.
Yeah, we need to go back to barn raising and the village raising the child, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to depend on others.
Yeah. Now, before we wrap up, two things. What advice or thought or final pearl of wisdom would you like to leave us with? And also, how can people connect with you?
So, pearl of wisdom kind of goes back to one thing that you said. We have got to give ourselves grace. I don't care who you are, we have got to give ourselves grace. So, we cannot be as hard on ourselves as we have been in the past. We're not going to be successful and available for the people that need us if we're not showing grace for ourselves. Absolutely. We're not showing the grace that other people need either. So it starts at home, right? We've got to show that grace to ourselves. So that's my biggest pearl of wisdom is grace. Give yourself some grace. There's no perfection. And, life is messy. Let it show, because other people need to see the mess of it. It's important. Absolutely. So as far as where to connect with me, I have a website, The Midlife Redefined, so you can reach me there, or you can email me at themidliferedefined.com.
That's awesome. So connect with Tisha at The Midlife Redefined. And as you listen through this episode, anybody that you think of, that could benefit from this conversation, share it with them. Invite them to listen and to open up and to extend themselves and others some grace. We highly, highly need that in this world. If we would all be more gracious with ourselves and with others, everything would kind of normalize and get better, right? So,
absolutely.
Tisha, thank you so much once again for being with us. And to everybody who joined us, thank you for your time. We don't take it lightly. And we'll see you next time on Sincerely Speaking.
Thank you, Marcy.